Imagine a lone rancher in the vast, unforgiving desert, his silence shattered by a desperate cry for help. Eli Turner hadn't heard a human voice in years. But when that Apache girl hit the dirt at his fence, barefoot, bruised, and barely conscious, he knew the desert silence was over. The morning sun hadn't crested the ridge yet, but the heat was already rising off the red dirt. Eli had just stepped out of his cabin with a tin cup of black coffee when he spotted movement near the north fence. Something small stumbling out of place. A girl, young, wrapped in nothing but torn cloth and exhaustion, staggered into view. Her steps dragged like she hadn't slept in days, and when her knees gave out, she collapsed face first against the cedar post like it was the last solid thing on earth. Eli froze. He could have turned back inside. Could have pretended he never saw her. That's how he'd survived this long, by staying out of trouble that wasn't his, the kind of trouble that screamed, bled, or begged. But as the wind shifted and carried her ragged breathing toward him, something old and unwelcome stirred in his chest. He set the cup down, crossed the dry earth in 3 long strides, and knelt beside her. The last time Eli Turner let someone this close, he buried them on the hill. Helping this girl wouldn't just stir ghosts, it might summon devils. She was barely conscious, one eye swollen shut, cheekbone purpled. Her skin was sun-scorched, arms covered in angry red welts, old and new. Her lips moved, but no words came out, just a dry rasp, less a sound than a warning. He touched her shoulder, gentle as a whisper. She flinched, then tried to crawl away. He didn't follow, just crouched where he was, letting her decide if he was worth fearing. A coyote howled somewhere far off. The breeze shifted again, carrying with it the faint smell of sweat, horse, and something fouler. "Easy," he said, the first word he'd spoken to another person in what felt like a year. "You're safe for now." She didn't answer, didn't move. Her chest rose and fell in shallow jerks. He looked around. No dust trails yet, but the tracks would lead someone here if they weren't already close. Eli stood, walked to the gate, unlatched it, and returned with his arms low and open. She didn't resist when he lifted her. Didn't help either. She weighed less than she should have, bone and fever. As he carried her toward the cabin, his boot crunched something in the dirt. A hand-carved medallion, Apache design, smudged with blood. He picked it up and slipped it into his coat pocket without a word. The screen door groaned open like it hadn't been used in years, though he oiled the hinges weekly. Inside, it was cool and dim. He laid her on the old horse blanket spread across the couch, then stepped back to study her face. Still just a kid, he didn't touch the rifle leaning against the wall. Not yet. Instead, he crouched to untie her makeshift wrappings, pulling them back just enough to see where she was hurt. One rib was clearly broken. There were rope burns on her wrists. Dirt and dried blood caked her knees. He rinsed a cloth, dabbed her face, poured water into a tin cup, and left it within reach. Then, without a word, he stepped outside again. The land was watching. His horse, Birch, stomped once, restless. The birds had stopped singing. Eli scanned the horizon. Nothing yet, but he could feel it, a pressure in the air. Something was coming. He leaned against the porch rail, hands in fists, eyes on the hills. A dust trail, thin as thread, uncoiled on the southern ridge. Eli didn't curse, didn't panic. He just whispered, "Well, damn. Could this be the start of a battle that changes everything?" Stay tuned to Real Stories Diary to find out. She didn't wake for another hour. Eli had cleaned her wounds, loosened the cloth around her waist, and covered her with the old buffalo hide blanket. She hadn't stirred. Just lay there curled toward the back of the couch like a child hiding from thunder. He didn't ask her name. Names came with weight, and sometimes weight got people killed. When she did wake, it was sudden and sharp. Her eyes snapped open, and she sat up too fast, then winced, clutching her ribs. Eli didn't move from the stove. He was heating beans in a dented tin pot, kept his back turned to her so she wouldn't feel caged. "You're in my cabin," he said quietly. "Nearest doctor's a liar and a drunk, so I did what I could." She didn't respond. Her eyes darted across the room, calculating. She spotted the door, the rifle, the axe, then him. You with him? Her voice was cracked. You work for Callahan? Eli turned slowly. No. She didn't believe him. He didn't blame her. You ran far, I'd guess. He scooped a spoonful of beans into a tin bowl and set it on the table. There's water, too, if you can keep it down. She made no move. So, he walked to the door, unhooked his gun belt, and hung it on the nail beside the coat rack, took the rifle down, placed it gently across two hooks above the hearth. When he turned back, she was watching him like a hawk. I don't keep slaves, he said. I don't sell girls. I don't ask questions I don't want the answers to. She blinked, then slowly slid her legs over the side of the couch. Her feet barely touched the floor. You're not what I expected. He raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? Someone meaner, louder. He poured a second cup of water, sat across the room out of reach. You got a name? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded once. Sahel. That meant falcon, if he remembered right. He'd picked up a little Apache from a tracker named Taza years ago, long before he quit on the world. Sahel Firewind. The second name caught something in his memory, something he didn't like. He filed it away. She reached for the bowl slowly, like expecting it to bite, took one bite, chewed like it hurt, swallowed like she hadn't in days. I shouldn't be here, she murmured. Eli didn't argue. He watched her wrap the blanket tighter, and for a brief moment, the image flickered. Not her anymore, but someone smaller with golden braids and fevered eyes. Emmy, his daughter, had curled up just like that the night the coughing got bad. He'd sat on that same chair, same fire, and told himself she'd pull through. She hadn't. He looked away. Outside, Birch snorted again. Hooves crunched dirt, then silence. Sahel stiffened. They found me. Eli crossed to the window. 2 riders, maybe 3, keeping distance, watching. One leaned off his saddle and studied the ground like a bloodhound. Tracker, Eli muttered. Saw was shaking now. You have to let me go. They'll burn your place down. They'll kill you. Eli kept watching. They don't look like men who've done a day of honest work in their lives. They work for Jed Callahan. He owns the trading post east of Dustwater. Her voice cracked again. He owns a lot more than that. Eli turned to her. Her lips trembled, but her eyes were fire. How many? She didn't need to ask what he meant. 12, she said. 12 girls, most of them younger than me. The medallion in his coat pocket burned cold against his ribs. He took a slow breath, stepped back from the window. Who the hell is this man, he muttered. And what the hell is he trying to bury out there in that ravine? Before we dive deeper into this gripping tale, are you ready for a twist that will leave you on the edge of your seat? Keep watching Real Stories Diary. Eli didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window with a rifle across his lap, watching the tree line where the riders had been. They hadn't come closer. Not yet. Just hovered beyond the dust like buzzards, waiting for something to die. Sahel lay curled beneath the buffalo blanket, eyes closed, but body tense. Every gust of wind made her flinch. Every creak of the cabin made her fingers twitch. Eli didn't speak. He wasn't good with words, and she wasn't asking for comfort. What she needed was time, shelter, and maybe someone willing to shoot back. By dawn, the horses were gone. No fresh tracks, no smoke on the ridge. But he knew better than to believe they'd given up. He poured a cup of water, tore off a piece of dry bread, and placed both on the table. You'll need your strength, he said, not looking at her. They're not done. She sat up slow, blinking through a haze of pain. Her lip was cracked, her arms still bruised, but there was more color in her face now, a little fire returning to her eyes. You should have let me die out there, she whispered. I thought about it. That surprised her. She looked at him, really looked, and maybe for the first time she understood something about the man who'd pulled her from the dirt. He wasn't kind. He was tired, but he hadn't walked away. Eli stepped outside into the morning heat. His boots kicked up dust as he made his usual rounds, checking fence posts, counting cattle, scanning the sky for vultures. He'd done this every day for 10 years. It used to bring him peace. Now it just felt exposed. About 100 yards from the north fence, he spotted something wrong. A cedar branch was broken, low to the ground, freshly snapped, unnatural angle, too clean for wind or cattle. He crouched and ran 2 fingers through the dirt, found the edge of a boot print, too narrow for his light pressure, someone scouting. He stood and scanned the horizon. Nothing. Back at the cabin, Sahal was staring at the wall, lips moving like she was reciting something. He recognized the cadence. Prayer maybe, or a list of names. He didn't interrupt. Instead, he walked to the back of the house and pulled a tarp off an old crate buried under firewood. Inside, a revolver wrapped in oilcloth, 6 bullets, and a rusted belt he hadn't worn since the war. He buckled it on slow, like fitting into an old skin. Sa turned at the sound. "You're not a rancher," she said softly. "Not lately. You've done this before." He looked at her. "And I've buried enough folks to know how it ends when you wait too long." There was a silence between them. Not awkward, just real. Then from outside came the low groan of wood underweight, the gate. Eli moved fast. In 2 steps, he was at the window. 3 men, not the ones from yesterday, different hats, different horses, but same posture, relaxed, practiced, ready. One had a rifle across his saddle. Another chewed on a toothpick like he owned the place. The one in front raised a hand in greeting. "Morning, neighbor." Eli didn't answer. He stepped back, picked up the rifle, and motioned to Sahel. "Get behind the stove. Stay low. Don't make a sound." She obeyed without a word. The knock came 5 seconds later. Casual, like they were selling church flyers. Eli opened the door slow, rifle in hand, but not raised. The man in front smiled. "Didn't mean to startle you, mister. We're just passing through, looking for someone." Eli didn't blink. "This ain't a post office." The smile widened. "Funny. Thought I saw fresh tracks near your east fence. Small feet, bleeding pretty bad. Don't suppose you seen anyone fit that?" Eli didn't answer. "Not yet." The man nodded as if that settled things. "Well, now that's a shame." He turned back toward his horse, but didn't mount. Instead, he crouched by the fence post, ran 2 fingers across the wood, studied it like it told stories. "You see this," he said, loud enough for the whole clearing to hear. She leaned here. Blood, see, smudged cedar bark. Faint print. He looked up, locking eyes with Eli. "Means she stopped here. Means she was alive when she did." Eli's knuckles whitened on the rifle. The man rose, dusted his pants. "Now I don't want trouble. Mr. Callahan don't want trouble. All we want is what's his. That girl, she's a thief. Ran off with something she shouldn't have. Law says he's got a right to collect." "What'd she steal?" Eli asked, voice steady. The man grinned. "Time, money, property." That word property hung in the air like a gnat over a grave. Eli stepped out onto the porch, the boards creaking under his boots. "Far as I can tell," he said, "this land's mine. That fence mine. Cabin, cattle, all mine, and the law around here don't let strangers walk in and claim people." "Don't it?" the man said smoothly. "Seems the law bends easy for folks with enough paper behind their words." He took a folded paper from his coat, waved it like a salesman, signed by Deputy Reeve of Dustwater County, legal retrieval warrant for 1 female fugitive. Designation unknown, presumed violent. Eli didn't take the paper. "Reeves a drunk and Callahan's dog," he said. "That scrap means nothing out here." The man sighed. "Well, we were hoping this would go smooth, but I get it. You're the stubborn type. Loyal, maybe. I can respect that." He leaned forward, voice lowering, but loyalty will get you buried. Eli stared at him a long beat, then turned his back and walked inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't slam it. He didn't lock it. Just set the rifle down and looked at Sahal crouched behind the stove with wide eyes. "You said Callahan had reach," he said. "I believe you now." Sahal's throat worked. "He won't let go. You saw how they talk. They think they own the law." Eli nodded slowly. "I'm going to buy you a few hours," he said. "But if you've got anything to say, say it now, 'cause next time they come, it won't be talking." She stood, clutching the blanket tighter around her. "There's more," she said, "about Callahan, about what he's doing." Eli met her gaze. "Then we better get to it." Outside, hooves kicked up dust as the three riders turned and rode off. Not fast, not in retreat, just buying time, like men who plan to come back with more. The silence after the riders left was thicker than dust. Eli stood in the doorway a while, watching their silhouettes vanish into the sagebrush. His hand rested on the frame like he was bracing against something he hadn't quite named yet. Behind him, Sahal still clutched the blanket, her chest rising in uneven breaths. "You said there's more," Eli said, not turning around. She hesitated, then nodded once. "They'll be back," she said softly. "With more men. Maybe with the sheriff. Maybe with a wagon and chains." Eli didn't argue. He stepped inside and shut the door. Sahal sat down slow on the edge of the couch, face pale, fingers tight around the hide like it was the only thing keeping her from shattering. "He's not just some traitor," she began. "Jed Callahan." Eli raised an eyebrow. "That's so he buys girls." Her voice cracked on the word, but she pushed through it. "Not just Apache, Mexicans, Chinese, sometimes even white ones, orphans mostly. He says it's dead labor, but it's not." Eli didn't ask for details. He could see enough in the way her hands trembled. "There's a place," she continued, "about 2 days southeast, tucked inside the canyon, Whispering Ravine, we call it. That's where he keeps them. Locked cabins, barbed wire, armed guards." She looked up. "There are 12 girls there now. One of them's my cousin Juana. She's 14. Eli leaned against the wall, said nothing. Sahal's voice dropped. "Last night, Juana tried to run. She got caught. They told us this morning. Callahan said she'd be made an example." Eli's jaw clenched. "I volunteered to clean the floors in the guardhouse. It's how I got the key. I opened the gate for her, hid her in a root cellar outside the walls. Then I ran the opposite direction to draw them away." She gave a bitter laugh. "But I guess I didn't draw far enough." Eli crossed to the table, pulled out the carved medallion he'd picked up earlier, laid it down between them. "This yours?" he asked. She nodded. "My mother gave it to me. It's Apache for truth doesn't run." He stared at it for a long moment, then sat across from her. "You said they'll punish the girls if you're not returned." "By sundown," she said, "that's the rule. If I'm not back by then, they assume I talked and they'll erase the problem." "By erase, you mean kill?" Sahal didn't answer. She didn't have to. Eli looked toward the horizon. The dust had settled. The day was just beginning, but already it felt heavy, loaded. He rubbed a hand across his face, like trying to wipe off something that had sunk too deep. "I lost someone once," he said, voice dry, distant. "My daughter, Emmy, fever took her before I could get help. And for a long time, I figured that was just how it worked. You can't save everybody." He looked at her. "But this ain't fever. This is men choosing to be wolves." Sahal nodded. Her eyes weren't just scared now. They were sharp, alive. "I didn't come here to beg for help," she said. "I came here to run. I thought if I led them far enough, someone might have time to do something. But there's no time left." "How far is this ravine?" Eli asked. 2 days if you ride the long way. 1 if you know the cut-throughs." "I do." A beat passed between them. You plan on going alone? She asked. I don't make plans. He stood, walked to the old trunk near the hearth, flipped it open. Inside, maps, ropes, saddlebags, things he hadn't touched in years. He looked over his shoulder. Can you ride? Not well, not fast. I'll ride. She blinked. You're serious? Eli slung the saddlebags over his shoulder. They're just girls, he said. And that man's built an empire out of pretending they don't matter. He picked up the medallion and tucked it into his pocket. Time somebody reminded him otherwise. They came back at noon. Eli heard them before he saw them. Hooves pounding harder this time, not stealthy like before. Dust boiled on the ridge, spilling over the horizon like storm clouds with spurs. Sahal stood by the window, her hands balled into fists. She didn't speak, neither did Eli. He counted the silhouettes. 8 riders. No attempt to hide numbers. Now the men spread out like they owned the land, confident, methodical. 2 circled wide toward the east pasture. 1 dismounted and knelt at the fence, checking tracks again. They weren't looking for a girl anymore. They were preparing to take her. Eli stepped outside before they reached the house. He didn't want them too close. Didn't want them near the walls or windows. He waited in the center of the yard, rifle slung across his chest, revolver at his hip, not aiming yet, but not relaxed either. The lead rider came forward with the easy arrogance of a man who'd never been told no. He was younger than Eli expected, late 30s maybe. Sharp coat, clean boots, gloves that had never touched dirt. You must be Mr. Turner, the man said, voice rich as molasses and just as thick with poison. Eli said nothing. I'm Jed Callahan. You've met some of my men already. He gestured behind him like showing off livestock. They tell me you've been less than cooperative. Eli's stare didn't waver. I don't cooperate with liars. Callahan smiled like it was a compliment. You're protecting stolen property. You know that, right? She's not property, Eli said flatly. Callahan raised an eyebrow, then pulled a folded document from his coat. Thick parchment, red wax seal. This here is a legal debt bond signed by Deputy Reeve of Dustwater and notarized by Circuit Judge Barnes. It grants me full retrieval rights over 1 fugitive native female indentured under breach of contract. He offered it like a pastor offering scripture. Eli didn't take it. That girl's got rope burns and broken ribs, he said. Doesn't look like a contract to me. Callahan's smile thinned. She ran. That's breach. I own the debt. Law says I get to collect. The law you bought, maybe. Careful, Mr. Turner, Callahan said, voice cooling. Accusing a judge of fraud's a mighty bold thing for a man without friends. Eli's grip tightened on the rifle just slightly. You've had your say, he replied. Now ride out. Callahan sighed like a man burdened by the stupidity of others. I was hoping we could handle this quiet. Dustwater's a small place. People talk. Wouldn't want word getting out that a rancher's harboring fugitives. He turned to go, then stopped. Oh, one more thing. He looked toward the cabin. I know the girl's in there, and I know she's not the only one who ran. One of the others, Juana I believe, still hasn't turned up. If I find out you've been hiding her cousin, too. He let the sentence hang. Eli didn't blink. Callahan swung up into his saddle. You've got till sundown, he said. Then we come back. And next time we ain't bringing paper. The riders turned as one, kicking up a storm of red dust as they vanished toward the ridge. When Eli went back inside, Sahal was pacing. He has the judge, she said, voice shaken. He has the sheriff. He has everything. Eli poured a glass of water, drank half, set it down. No, he said, he doesn't have me. Sah looked at him. Really looked. You're going to fight him. I don't have a choice. You did yesterday. He nodded. Not anymore. The sun dropped lower in the sky, casting long copper shadows across the hard-packed yard. The wind picked up, dry and restless, carrying with it the smell of dust, sweat, and something else, like rust on iron. Eli stood at the barn, oiling the hinges on the back door. Not because they needed it, but because he needed something to do with his hands. Inside the cabin, Sahal was quiet. She hadn't asked questions since Callahan left, but her silence was louder than a scream. Eli had already moved her bedroll to the root cellar out back, hidden beneath a false hatch and covered in old burlap sacks. It wasn't much, but it would hold if bullets started flying. He told her not to come out unless she heard his voice twice. No exceptions. He checked his rifle again. Clean, loaded, spare rounds in the satchel hanging by the stove. His revolver was strapped tight to his hip. A hunting knife tucked in the boot he hadn't worn in 7 years. He was ready, but he wasn't calm. Standing by the tack wall, Eli ran his fingers along the worn leather bridle hanging there. It had belonged to Emmy's pony. Her name had been burned into the side with a hot nail, Ember. He hadn't looked at it in a decade. He hadn't touched it since the funeral. Sahal appeared in the doorway behind him, wrapped in his old duster. Her hair was tied back now, her steps steadier. But her eyes, they held too much for someone her age. Too much pain, too much clarity. You don't have to do this, she said. Eli turned slow. Tell that to the ground I buried my daughter in, he said. Tell it to your cousin. Tell it to the 12 others waiting for someone to care. Sahal swallowed. But it's suicide, maybe. He hung the bridle back on the wall. But it's mine to choose. She stepped closer. I never asked you to fight. You did. He paused. And I wasted it, thinking I could still live quiet. Thinking hiding was the same as surviving. He walked past her out into the golden light. The sky was bleeding orange now. The kind of beauty that didn't ask permission to exist beside violence. Sahal followed. Do you have a plan? Eli nodded toward the corral. There's an old ridge trail north of here leads to Devil's Backbone. From there, I can get eyes on the ravine, figure out how many men, how they're posted, what we're dealing with. And then I ride back here. We gather what we can. You guide me in the back way. We burn it down, she blinked. You really believe that'll work? No, he said plainly. But sometimes justice doesn't wait for certainty. Sahal crossed her arms. You still haven't asked me to stay behind because you won't. They stood there, two silhouettes against a sinking sun, silence stretching between them like taut wire. After a long pause, she asked, if you don't come back. Eli took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and looked toward the hills. Then you ride south. Follow the San Pedro until you hit water. Stay off the roads. Change your name and don't look back. Sahal looked down at her bare feet, then back up. I was going to die in the desert, she said. Then you came. So if you die now, I don't go on. I finish what you started. Eli's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. But he reached into his coat and pulled out a small tin box, opened it. Inside was a silver star, tarnished, dulled with age. Used to belong to a man I once called a friend. He said it meant something. I never believed him. He handed it to her. Hold on to it. Maybe you'll figure out what he meant. She closed her hand around it. The star was warm from his pocket. Then, without another word, Eli saddled his horse. Birch stomped once, sensing the tension, but didn't resist. Sa stood in the doorway as he mounted. I'll be back by dawn, he said. And then he rode north into the dark, into the mountains, into the storm he'd spent 10 years avoiding. The knock came just before sunset, not a timid one this time, solid, measured, like a judge arriving for a sentence already written. Eli was sitting at the table, polishing the barrel of his Winchester. He didn't look up. He'd been expecting them. Sa was hidden in the root cellar just like they planned. Trapdoor sealed, covered in loose boards and horse feed. If she didn't make a sound, they wouldn't find her. If Eli did his job, they wouldn't get the chance. The knock came again, harder. Outside, hooves shuffled, boots crunched gravel. Maybe a dozen men, maybe more. He'd heard them setting up, spreading wide along the fence line, surrounding the place like they owned it. Eli stood, picked up his rifle, and walked to the door. He opened it slowly. Jed Callahan stood on the porch, gloved hands folded over his belt. No paper this time, no smile. "Evening, Mr. Turner," Eli said. "Nothing." "You didn't take my offer seriously," Callahan continued. "Some men need persuasion." He stepped aside, revealing a wagon in the distance. Inside it, ropes, chains, and a cage door. "Bring the girl out. We won't burn your place down." Eli leaned against the doorframe, rifle loose in his grip. "I buried my wife under that cottonwood," he said. "My daughter, too. You burn this place, you better throw me on top of them." Callahan nodded like he pitied the old fool. "That can be arranged." He gave a small wave. Two men dismounted and started forward. Eli didn't move. Not until they crossed the line. There was a faded horseshoe nailed to the post just outside the porch, barely visible now, rusted by time. But Eli remembered placing it there. He remembered what it meant. No man passed that line unless they meant harm. The moment the first boot crossed the gravel edge, Eli raised his rifle. One shot. The man dropped instantly, legs buckling beneath him. The second froze. Eli chambered the next round, smooth as breath. "Try me," he said. That was enough. Gunfire erupted from the trees, from the gate, from behind the feed shed. Eli dove sideways, rolled behind the water trough, and returned fire. His second shot took a man off his horse. His third missed, ricocheted off a wagon wheel. Bullets tore through the siding of the cabin, shattered the lantern by the window. A bullet clipped the corner of the porch post, spraying splinters. He ducked, reloaded, fired again. The battle wasn't clean. It was fast, messy, brutal. Eli had the advantage of cover and terrain. He knew every inch of that land, every dry wash and blind corner. They had numbers, but not patience. One man tried to flank the cabin, snuck along the west fence. Eli waited until he stepped into the open, then dropped him with a shot to the thigh. Not fatal, but enough. Callahan barked orders, frustrated now. "Smoke him out." A torch flew, landed in the hay pile near the barn. Flames caught fast. Eli ran. He grabbed the water barrel, tipped it hard, doused the worst of the blaze before it could leap. His sleeve caught fire. He beat it out, teeth gritted, rifle still in hand. He turned, fired again, another man down. They were retreating now, pulling back, regrouping. Callahan hadn't expected resistance like this. Not from a man he thought was just another broken-down rancher. Eli stepped out of the smoke, ash clinging to his coat. He looked at the wagon, still empty, still waiting. He chambered one more round and aimed straight at the iron cage, then fired. The door blew open, the lock shattering in sparks. A message. "No one's property here." Smoke still curled from the hay pile near the barn. The air stank of gunpowder, singed leather, and something deeper, like a reckoning. Eli stood motionless in the yard, rifle lowered, but ready. 4 men lay wounded. One wasn't moving. The others had scattered back to the tree line, hiding behind brush and saddles. Callahan was crouched behind the wagon, cheeks smudged with ash, pride leaking from his eyes. Then came the sound. Hoofbeats, slow, steady, confident. Not from Callahan's line, but the ridge trail. Eli didn't need to look twice. Marshal Tobias Crow rode in like thunder wrapped in silence. His coat flapped in the wind, badge glinting in the last light. One hand rested casually on the saddle horn, the other near his holster, but not because he was nervous, because he didn't have to be. He took one long look at the yard, at the bullet holes in the cabin walls, the blood-stained gravel, the broken cage door still swinging on its hinges. Then he spoke. Jed Callahan, you've just made one hell of a mistake. Callahan straightened slowly, trying to reclaim the authority that had drained from him. Marshal, he said, brushing dust off his sleeves. This ain't your concern. I came here with a legal bond. This man obstructed it with gunfire. Crow didn't answer immediately. He dismounted, walked past Eli without a word, and picked up the parchment Callahan had dropped. He read it slowly, thoroughly, then folded it in half, and again, and then he tore it once, clean down the center. Judge Barnes was arrested 2 days ago, Crow said calmly. Territorial corruption charges. Turns out he's been signing debt contracts that ain't worth spit, including this one. Callahan froze. That's not possible. It's more than possible, Crow said. It's official. Dustwater sent a writer last night. Reeves out, too. You've got no legal authority, no paper, and no standing. Just a pile of broken men and a burning lie. Callahan's jaw clenched. I still got witnesses. I still got men. And I still got that girl. Crow turned to Eli. Where is she? Eli didn't hesitate. Safe. Crow nodded, then turned back to Callahan. You want to explain what a girl with busted ribs and rope burns was doing under your custody? Callahan tried to smile. It didn't work. She's property, Marshal. My property, bought legal 3 years ago. Her father sold her to settle a debt. I got signatures. You got nothing, Crow snapped. Not anymore. He stepped closer. His voice didn't rise. It dropped. We fought a war about that word property. Maybe you missed the ending. Your side lost. Callahan's hand twitched near his belt, but Crow was faster. One click. His revolver was out. Barrel pointed at Callahan's heart. Eli didn't move. He didn't need to. Crow said, reach for that gun, and I won't arrest you. I'll bury you. Callahan froze. I ought to bring you in now, Crow continued. But I've got bigger fish to fry and 12 girls in a canyon who might not see another sunrise if we waste time here. He looked at Eli. You still got fight in you? Eli nodded once. Good, Crow said. Mount up. He holstered his weapon, then turned to Callahan one last time. You come near this ranch again, I won't bother with court. Then he walked toward his horse, voice trailing like the end of a prayer. Some things, Jed, just ain't for sale. They rode out under a sky heavy with stars. Eli, Crow, and Sahal moved fast through the ridgelines north of the ranch, cutting across dry gulches and shadowed ravines. No campfire, no talking, just hooves against stone and breath in their chests. Every hour mattered. Every mile stolen from the night was one less bullet they'd have to dodge at dawn. Sahal rode Birch, Eli's big sorrel gelding, while Eli and Crow took 2 of the horses Callahan's men had left behind. Crow didn't complain about the smell. He'd seen worse. Whispering Ravine was 30 miles southeast, carved deep into the flank of Black Mesa. An old mining road used to run straight through it before a landslide buried the eastern exit. Now the only way in or out was a single winding trail that hugged the rock wall like a noose. That was the plan. They'd blow the pass, trap Callahan's men inside, then storm the compound from opposite ends. Quick, clean, no mercy. By the time the moon dipped behind the hills, they'd reached the canyon rim. The view was worse than Sahal remembered. Below them, half a dozen buildings sat clustered along the canyon floor. Shacks, sheds, a central cabin reinforced with metal bars. 2 towers with lanterns burned at opposite corners. Dogs barked in the distance. Shadows moved between the structures like phantoms. Crow took a spyglass from his saddlebag and scanned the area. 6 men on patrol, he murmured. 2 more in the south tower. Could be more inside. Sahal pointed to a squat, windowless building at the edge. That's where they kept us. Dirt floor, no beds, just straw and locks. Eli crouched near the ledge, unfolding a canvas satchel. Inside, sticks of dynamite, fuses, and a small tin of blasting caps wrapped in cloth. Crow raised an eyebrow. You keep that on hand? Used to clear rocks for the irrigation trench, Eli said. I kept what was left. Figured I'd need it one day. Guess today's the day. Eli nodded toward the lower bend of the trail. That curve there is the weakest point. If we bring down those boulders, the whole pass closes. No way out. Crow looked at Sahal and the girls. They're locked in by dark. Most likely in the main cabin. Windows are barred, but I can get in through the roof. There's a hatch above the bunks. You sure? I lived in there for 3 years, she said. I'm sure. Eli handed her a coil of rope. You take the east slope. Drop in quiet. Get the girls ready. Crow checked his pistol. I'll draw their fire from the south. Get them looking the wrong direction. Eli stuffed the dynamite back into the satchel, tied it tight. They all paused a moment. No speeches, no prayers, just one look between them. Then they moved. Crow veered south through the scrub. Sahali disappeared down the eastern incline, boots silent on the shale. Eli stayed low, picking his way down the northern slope, using what was left of the old mining trail. He reached the curve without being seen. He set the charges fast, hands steady despite the ticking clock in his head. One here wedged between the shale, another beneath the shelf of brittle limestone. A third just in case. He lit the fuse, counted to 5, and ran. The blast hit like thunder, cracking stone. A wall of rock came crashing down, choking the canyon mouth in dust and debris. Horses screamed, men shouted, and all across the ravine, lanterns flared to light. The compound was awake, but not ready. Eli rose from the dust, rifle in hand, and ran toward the fire. The explosion echoed through the canyon like a giant's roar. Before the dust settled, Eli was already moving, boots pounding rock, rifle gripped tight. Shouts rang out below. Lanterns swung wildly. Men scrambled in every direction, half blind in the smoke. He didn't give them time to organize. The first guard he encountered was still trying to unsling his carbine when Eli dropped him with a shot to the shoulder. Not fatal, but enough to knock him out of the fight. He ducked behind a feed bin, bullets slicing the air around him. A dog barked madly before a sharp whistle cut it short. Crow's signal from the south. The diversion was working. From the corner of his eye, Eli saw the lantern tower tilt, then collapse. Crow must have brought it down with a rope or lucky shot. Either way, shadows danced across the ravine like spirits on fire. Eli moved in closer. He reached the main cabin just as a scream cut through the smoke. Not fear, but defiance. Sahal. He rounded the side of the structure in time to see her drop from the roof, kicking a guard square in the chest. He fell hard, gasping. She didn't hesitate, grabbed his keys, and sprinted to the door. Inside, the girls huddled together in the corner, wide-eyed, trembling, but alive. Get up, she barked. Now. We don't have time. Eli covered the door, picking off 2 more men as they emerged from the bunkhouse with shotguns raised. One fell, the other fired wide, panicked. Eli dropped to a knee and put him down clean. Sahal led the first girl out, barefoot, bleeding, no more than 13. Then another, and another. By the time the 6th stumbled into the night, Callahan emerged. He was furious and armed. From the 2nd-story porch of his private cabin, he shouted into the chaos, "Get the girl! Get them all! Kill anyone in your way!" He spotted Eli and raised his pistol, but Eli didn't fire. Not yet. He stepped into the open, rifle low. It's over, Callahan. Callahan laughed. You think this ends with a few sticks of dynamite and a bleeding heart? He gestured to the compound. These girls are dead, nothing more. You kill me, it won't change what they are. Eli raised his rifle. They're not property. Callahan sneered. They're leverage, bargaining chips. And when the dust settles, I'll still own the shot. Cut him off. Not from Eli, from the shadows behind him. Sahal stepped forward, revolver smoking in her hand. Callahan stumbled back, staring at the hole in his chest like he couldn't believe it was real. He crumpled to the ground. Dead. Sahal stood still, breathing hard. Her hands trembled, but her eyes didn't waver. He was about to reach for one, she whispered. Eli nodded once. Good shot. The last of Callahan's men threw down their weapons when Crow emerged from the smoke with a badge in one hand and a shotgun in the other. It's done, the marshal said. No more running. The girls gathered near the fire, bruised, hollow-eyed, but upright. Some wept, some stared. One of them, barely more than a child, clutched Sahal's hand like a lifeline. Juana. Eli crouched beside them, looked her in the eyes. You're safe now. She didn't answer, but she didn't let go either. 3 days later, Dustwater was quieter than usual. Not silent, just humbled. The townsfolk stood along the main street as Marshal Crow rode in, trailed by 2 wagons and 14 riders. One wagon carried Callahan's body. The other carried 12 girls who had no home to return to. No one cheered. No one clapped. But no one looked away either. The judge's office had been shuttered. Reeve was gone, disappeared into the hills the same night word of Barnes' arrest reached town. No one searched too hard for him. Eli stood at the edge of the crowd, hat in hand, coat still singed from the fire at the ravine. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Sahal stood beside him, hair braided down her back, eyes calm but alert. Juana clung to her side. Her small fingers looped through Sahal's like roots clinging to rock. Crow dismounted, tossed a bloodied contract onto the steps of the old courthouse. Anyone still think this was legal, he said, loud enough for every window to hear. You can meet me inside. No one moved. Later that day, the saloon stayed closed. The general store lowered its shutters. The sheriff's office got new locks. And in the center of town, under the old cottonwood, where bounty posters used to hang, someone nailed a fresh sign. No more chains. No more silence. Eli read it once, then again. He felt something shift in his chest, something heavy loosening. By sundown, the 12 girls had been split into groups. Some to stay with Crow's relatives, others with rancher families that knew better than to ask questions. Juana, though, refused to leave Sahal's side. She's all I got left, she whispered. Eli looked at Sah. You still got a place at the ranch, he said. Both of you. Sah didn't answer right away. Then she nodded, and for the first time in days, Juana smiled. Spring crept back into the valley like a quiet apology. The fires were gone. The fences were mended, but some scars, like the blackened beams above Eli's porch, were left untouched on purpose. He stood there now, 1 foot on the step, watching Sahal and Juana in the paddock. They were brushing the horses, slow, careful strokes. Juana had taken to Birch like he was a storybook creature. She whispered to him in Apache, and he seemed to understand. Sahal caught Eli watching. She didn't smile. Not exactly, but something in her eyes eased. You never did say why you kept that old horseshoe nailed to the post, she called. Eli glanced at the rusted shape, still clinging to the porch beam. Superstition, I guess. She raised an eyebrow. Lucky charm. No, he said, lying in the dirt. She didn't ask what that meant. Didn't need to. Later, they sat together under the cottonwood tree. Same spot where Eli used to drink alone. Now there were 3 cups, tin mugs, dented and warm with coffee. Juana had brought hers full of wildflowers instead. She arranged them like a ceremony. Each bloom placed with purpose. Sahal spoke first. You don't talk much about your daughter. Eli looked away. The wind stirred the tree limbs above. She was 6, he said finally. Couldn't ride worth a damn, but she tried. Called every horse Thunder no matter what. Silence. Not awkward, just open. Sahal nodded slowly. My mother braided my hair like this, she said, lifting the dark strand over her shoulder. Before they took me, before I stopped counting seasons. Eli looked at her then, not just as the girl he saved, or the fighter she became, but as a whole life he hadn't known, quietly surviving beside his own. Maybe this ain't the life we planned, he said. Sahal's gaze didn't flinch. No, but maybe it's the one that needed to happen. They sat that way as the sun dropped low, not speaking of the past, not worrying the future, just sharing a silence neither of them had ever known as peace. Days passed, then weeks. Dustwater didn't become a perfect place, but it became honest. Juana began helping at the general store. Shy at first, then bold, especially when it came to counting coins. She'd squint, tap her fingers, and correct the shopkeeper with a grin that said, "I may be small, but I see everything." Sahal took to teaching Apache and settler children alike. She showed them how to read tracks, how to boil water with hot stones, how to listen for the sound of truth in someone's voice, not just their words. And Eli, he built a bench beneath the cottonwood tree, same one where Sahal had once stood, defiant, where he'd once stood alone. Now he sat there in the evenings. Juana curled beside him, drawing horses in the dust with a stick. Sahal nearby mending gear, humming a tune he didn't know but liked all the same. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to because something had changed. Not just in the land, but in the space between people, in how they looked at one another, how they chose to act when no one was watching. Eli used to believe some things couldn't be rebuilt. Now he knew better because healing didn't come all at once. It came like rain in the desert, slow, stubborn, and sacred. Have you ever seen something wrong and stepped in when no one else would? Have you ever carried a story that the world didn't want to hear, but you told it anyway? Then maybe you understand. Maybe you've lived your own true Wild West story. And if this tale meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone or some place or some version of yourself you thought you'd buried, let us know in the comments, because these stories don't end when the screen fades, they begin again with you. And if you'd like to ride with us again, hit that subscribe button because more true Wild West stories are coming from Real Stories Diary. And every single one begins the same way with a moment, a choice, and